Okay. Um, Hello, everybody. My name is Ava Faraday. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I work in the Center for Service and Action, who's hosting this conference. Super excited that all of you are here. This session is being recorded, and I have enabled live transcripts for anybody who may need the closed captioning. Um, so welcome to Change the Status Quo. Hopefully you guys have been able to go to some different workshops throughout the day. So now I would like to introduce Dendron, our presenter. Dendron is a Cal Poly alumnus, class of 2012. And so today, Dendron will discuss how to nix transphobic language in everyday speech. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Dendron.
Thanks. So as our volunteer said, I am a Cal Poly alumnus, class of 2012. My major was architecture. I'm back in school. It's a long story, but I'm in STEM now. So this workshop today, we're going to start with some context and vocabulary review. Most of you will be familiar with the material in this part, but I'm going to go over it anyway, just to make sure we're all on the same page before we go to our breakout rooms. Then I'm going to introduce some methods that we can use to remove gender from language in ways that actually make sense and are easy and flow naturally. Then after each method I introduce and show how to use, I'll put you in breakout rooms. Well, actually, our volunteer will put you in breakout rooms where you can work with your group on example sentences that I provide. You will be in the same groups every time you go into breakout rooms. So I'm giving you a couple extra minutes the first time you go into breakout rooms so you can introduce yourselves, get all that out of the way. But I'm going to warn you ahead of time, this workshop is intentionally set up to have more material than you can actually get to in the breakout room. So if you don't cover it all, don't feel bad. It was set up that way to begin with. And at the end, we'll have a closing discussion, and if there's time for it, there will be some question and answers. So without further ado, let's start with some vocabulary. Sex, which is different from gender, refers to a physiological state of being. Most people have heard of the male sex, the female sex, and a lot of people these days are finally having heard of intersex, where intersex is actually an entire category, very complicated. We're not going to get into that in this workshop, but I do want to point out the asterisks here, where these words, even though we think of them as being scientific, they're actually cultural. They come from English-speaking Western cultures. And on this page, we've got gender, which is different from sex in that it encompasses several concepts. It's even more heavily cultural, whether you're talking about gender identity or gender presentation or cultural gender role. All of these words get pushed together into one little neat package called gender in our culture. We think of them as all being the same thing, even though they're not. So it gets really complicated. And again, that goes beyond the scope of this workshop, but it's just some context to have in the back of your mind as we go through the material. And again, most people have heard of women, men, and non-binary people. Non-binary is a category. It's not a specific gender, although there are people who use that word to describe their genders to other people, sometimes because that is their gender, sometimes because it's just easier than trying to convey a very complex topic that doesn't really have words in English, which goes back to that asterisk here, which is that these words come from English-speaking Western cultures, which is why, because of that caveat there, that's why the term two-spirit isn't on here. Some additional concepts. Gender is not visible. You cannot tell what someone's gender is just by looking at a person. Misgendering causes harm. It's painful. Some people don't want to talk about their genders, and if you put all of this together, it means that truly inclusive language prevents us from misgendering others, even when we don't know what their genders are. How do we do that? That's what this workshop is about. So, one of the most common ways to do that is we'll just use they, them. The problem with that is that they, them, their pronouns are only neutral sometimes, and other times they have a gendered connotation. So to illustrate that, I've got a story for you. Let's say it's post-pandemic. We've finished getting everyone vaccinated. Life is back to normal, and we're going to throw the pandemic after party, right? So your friend walks up to you and starts gushing about this amazing new career path that your friend got all figured out during the COVID time. And as your friend talks to you, you notice David off in the background, in a different part of the party. And so you don't really know David that well, but you know that David is in the field that your friend wants to go into. So you say to your friend, you see that owl over there? That's David. They're really awesome. They're in your field. I think you should go talk to them about this. So let's pause this story for a second and talk about what just happened here, because this was a massive miscommunication. What you thought you said was, I don't know David very well, so I'm using they, them pronouns because I don't know what David's gender is. What your friend heard was, David is non-binary and uses they, them pronouns, and I'm telling you this so that you can be polite to them. These are not the same concept, right? So let's go back to our story and see what happens. Your friend walks up to David, they start chatting, they're having a grand old time with each other, and then your friend's friend walks up. And your friend says, this is David, have you met them? They're so cool. Let's step back outside of the story for a second here. David happens to be a man, and not only is he a man, he is a transgender man whose family does not accept it. In fact, his family keeps calling him they, them because they don't actually respect his identity and they refuse to accept him as a man. This causes a lot of pain. Even in transgender spaces sometimes, where he feels he should be safe, when people call him they, them, and he corrects them, sometimes even transgender people are mean to him about it. So here he is at this party with these strangers who are calling him they, them, not knowing that he's got all of this past pain and sometimes current pain surrounding these pronouns. He doesn't know why they're calling him these words. He doesn't know what will happen, what reaction they will have if he corrects them. And he does know that if he doesn't say anything, everyone at this party will eventually think that his pronouns are they, them, and it could have long-term implications. Now, this conundrum that David is stuck in with the surrounding pain would never have happened if it wasn't for this miscommunication at the very beginning. If you had used truly neutral language, language that didn't have any pronouns at all when talking to your friend, David wouldn't be in this situation now. And again, how do we do that? That's what this workshop is really about. So I'm going to give you a couple methods. I'm going to talk about how they work, and then I'm going to put you in breakout rooms with 3 people. And again, you're going to have the same people in your group every time. Usually your breakout rooms will be 5 minutes long, but the first time is going to be 8 minutes long. So you have a couple extra minutes to introduce yourselves to each other. The first method I want to talk about is pronoun substitution. The concept here is that you replace the pronouns, and usually you do that with words that refer to the object instead of to the subject. And you'll notice as you look at this method that it's not going to apply to every situation, and that's okay, it's not supposed to. It's just one tool of many that we're going to go over. So an example sentence here, Raven went to her desk to get her pen. If I change these words here that are highlighted in green to refer to the objects instead of to Raven, well, Raven went to the desk to get a pen. No information is lost. We all know what's going on here, and you have not actually used gender at all in the sentence. The next method I'm going to show you for removing gender is pronoun deletion. As you start practicing this, it will, at least for me, it was pretty astounding, and it might surprise you as well, just how many times we use pronouns, we don't even need them. So here's an example of that. Emilios ate his dinner rapidly before doing his homework. I can actually just completely delete those words entirely and get Emilios ate dinner rapidly before doing homework. No information is lost here. We all know what's going on. And again, this is not a method that's going to apply in every single situation, but it's not supposed to. It's supposed to be one tool to help you. And remember, we have more methods coming. So our volunteer is about to put you into breakout groups. These are the example sentences you're going to work on. I will drop them in chat for you so that you can still see them. You're also welcome to grab a screenshot of this before you jump into your group. Curious to hear from people how that went, using substitution and deletion on these sentences. I see 1 thumbs up. I also can't see everyone. Does anyone want to share a solution?
Do you want us to just jump in?
Yeah.
All right. One of the things that our group found interesting is our first solution for the 4th one made it passive voice, and our second solution ended up changing the verb.
What were your 2 solutions?
So the first one was Stevani got launched into the air. And the second one was Stevani flew or leapt into the air.
Very nice. Did anyone try deletion with that sentence?
We did deletion.
Yeah,
So we did deletion. So we just went Stevani launched into the air.
Yeah, exactly. All of these are really great solutions. I like that people have come up with so many different ones. So since we had a little bit of a technological snafu a second ago, I'm going to move on so that we can get through the rest of the material.
Well, I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
If that's okay. So I was wondering about the first one and pet his cat. And we tried to do like a cat or the cat, but it doesn't show whose cat it is.
Right, yes. In a lot of cases, using substitution or deletion can lose information, especially ownership information. So if the ownership information is important to the sentence, or if the ownership information isn't provided by surrounding context and it's important, then this may not be the right tool to use in that situation. In other situations, it may not matter. Like if there's only one cat in the entire universe and everyone knows it belongs to Dr. Claw, we're not going to have to say who it belongs to in the pronouns for it to make sense, right? I mean, obviously that's not the situation. There are a lot of cats out there, but there are other methods that we'll get to that will help with that. Good question. So moving on. Yeah, there we go. Here, I just wanted to provide a quick twist for those of you who found that super easy and want something a little more advanced. You can, when you're replacing that pronoun with something that refers to the object instead of the subject, you can use that as an opportunity to provide additional information. So Timothy delighted Tobin with his gifts. You could say Timothy delighted Tobin with meaningful gifts, with expensive gifts, with useless gifts, right? Whatever information you put there is going to add meaning to the sentence. So method 3, now we're getting into the hard stuff. You're going to want your imagination with you. Creative references. The concept here is to use context, the surrounding context, to create an appropriate reference for the subject. And when I say you're going to need your imagination here, I mean partly in order to come up with which words to use, but also you and your group will be creating the context for these sentences. There is no wrong answer here. You can make it whatever you want it to be. Don't get hung up on trying to find the one true right answer, because there isn't one. There's an infinite number of right answers. So here's my example sentence. She went that way, right? It's really hard to replace she in that sentence without having any other information. So let's make up some context here. Maybe you are at a convention for biologists and one random physicist is there. If you say the physicist went that way, everyone's going to know who you're talking about because this is a biology convention. Why is there a physicist here? I don't know. Maybe this person just really loves learning. The physicist went that way. Maybe you're at a party. You can say the one in the blue dress went that way. Now, if this is an Alice in Wonderland themed party and everyone's wearing a blue dress with a white apron, that's not going to be very helpful. But if there's only one person there with a blue dress, you can use that surrounding context. Say the person in the blue dress, the one in the blue dress went that way. Those of you who are fluent in American Sign Language are already accustomed to doing this. Just bring that skill with you into English. I don't know if any of you have ever done live action role playing, but archers tend to stand out because they've got these really big, colorful pads on the ends of their arrows because we're trying to not actually kill anyone. And so they have these, these big things and they're walking around with them. If you say the archer went that way, everyone's going to know who you're talking about, even if they don't know who the archer is. So be creative, come up with a context. As a group, pick one context to work with together for each of the sentences. We're going to go back into breakout rooms with the same people. Again, you can go ahead and grab a screenshot of this if you want to, and I'm going to drop the copy paste into chat. All right, welcome back, welcome back. Ava, would you do me a favor and tell me when everyone's back from the breakout room?
Yes. We still
Awesome,
have a couple people left, but they're going to close automatically in about 2 seconds. Okay.
second. I was like, oh.
Did someone have something to say?
I think we're all back. I think we're good.
Okay, how did that go? Anyone have any thoughts, solutions you want to share?
I think it was a little bit more challenging, right? Because sometimes like context plays such a huge role in how we decide to form our language. And so we were trying to find things that were more generic without having that context. Because, for example, like he looked at the camera, like it could be a model, it could be a student, it could be, so in those situations, you try to identify the person for like their role versus for their gender. So it's kind of how we approach it.
Exactly. The role instead of something you can't know, which is a gender, right? That's exactly right. That's why I was hoping people would make up context for this. And the whole make up context thing is going to be important to the next exercise as well. So we heard the model looked at the camera was a great one for number 4. Does anyone want to try one of the others, the solution that you came up with? Give us your context in your solution.
We talked a little bit about like maybe hair color. So for the first one, like, did you see the blonde step out of the dressing room? Could be a good one.
Yeah, physical features that you can see that you can point out. Blonde is good. People from various races have very mixed opinions about whether pointing out someone by race is a good idea or not. In deaf culture, it's very common to do it that way. In English-speaking culture, it can be more of a gray area. So I think it's probably better to go hair color or what people are wearing. Did anyone have one for number 2?
My group came up with the student thought it would be funny to egg the bully's car.
Awesome. So the context there is we're talking about kids, right? Is that how you got student?
Yeah.
How about number 3?
Our group thought that maybe it would be, why didn't the officer try to stop you this time, or the principal? So just by their position.
Awesome. I've also heard the Wicked Witch or the Wizard of Oz, things like that as well. All right, so let's move on. There we go. So the next method is the hardest one. This is also our last method for this workshop. This is sentence restructuring. It's like taking that draft and ripping it up, throwing it over your shoulder and starting all over again, which is why it is so hard. So the concept here is you focus on what is the information I'm actually trying to convey, and then you convey that in a new sentence instead of focusing on where the pronouns are in the sentence. Now, when I say this is the hardest, there are some people who think differently than I do, and they find this to be the easiest solution. That might be you. I don't know. So, example sentence. Cameron went to his car to get his books. This is almost the same sentence as the first example sentence. We've got a person went to a place to get a thing, right? So Cameron went to his car to get his books. You could use Cameron went to the car to get books, or Cameron went to the car to get some books, right? With the first 2 methods. I'm using this as an example because it has lots of different pieces of context to help you see how you can pull different information out of a sentence with this method. So if the thing that's important are the books, Cameron went to go get the books we need. If the thing that's important is how long Cameron will be gone, well, don't worry, Cameron will be back soon. But if you need all of that information plus ownership, Cameron has the books we need and went to go fetch them real quick, right? So in this exercise, again, there's no right answer. You don't actually have the context. You don't know which information is important. It doesn't matter. Pick something. Pick ownership, pick the object, pick the subject, pick the time, pick something, and then come up with a solution that conveys that information without using gender. And this is just for practice to figure out how to make this work with your brain. So it really doesn't matter which context you pick for this exercise. Here's your slide. I will copy and paste this into chat again. And again, feel free to take a screenshot of this slide before you go to your breakout room. Welcome back, everyone, from the most difficult of the methods so far. How did that go? What did you come up with? And when you answer, tell us which number you're talking about, which information was identified as important, and then the solution you came up with accordingly.
I can say for number one, our group decided that it was important of sort of like who was to blame or whose fault. And so we decided that the person being blamed was a nurse. And so the new sentence was, if the doctor was to blame, why is the nurse being blamed? It was something similar to that, but that's what we decided to restructure it as.
Nice. Very nice. Does anyone have one for number two?
I can go because I was in the room with you and I was overcomplicating things. So maybe this will be a lesson to everybody. I was kind of going off and trying to restructure this, that, and the other thing. And Dendron reminded me what is the most important information to convey in this sentence. So the way I restructured it was I gave the person a name. I said, Jake was ecstatic to start the class. I think it can be as simple as that.
Anyone have one for number three?
We decided that something important was just making sure everyone has a ride to the campsite or wherever. So we wanted to ask the question instead, what is everyone's mode of transport for the camping trip?
Excellent. That's very good. What if it's not a group trip? What if it is one person going camping? Did anyone have a solution that keeps it singular?
I think one of the things that we thought of was having the name of the camping location and switching that out to say how, I think we also changed it. So I guess how would the student get to camp lake place? I don't know.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
That's a great solution. What if, oh, wow, my voice cracked. What if you don't have the location? Did anyone have a solution for that where it's singular and you don't have the location?
Couldn't you just do a delete there?
I mean,
So
probably.
Like say the person's name, like how is Bob getting to the camping trip?
Yes, you could do that. But we're trying to practice the restructuring method with this slide. But you're right, that is definitely a valid solution for this sentence, if you know the person's name. Let's move on to number 4. Does anyone have a solution for number 4?
Yeah, I can share what my room did. We said, is that possible even without the magic?
Nice. Because if everyone, this sentence already implies that everybody knows whoever this is lost magic, right? So even though your solution doesn't show ownership of magic, like that's clearly already part of the context, so it doesn't need to. That's a really great solution.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see, how much time do we have left? It's about 12 minutes. So Ava, we're not going to do another breakout room for your reference. So this is a challenge paragraph. I'm going to drop it in chat. I would recommend that you take a screenshot, copy and paste it, something, Somebody put, what is the easiest way to get to the campsite? That is a very good gender neutral sentence, but I also think it loses the point, which is it's about a specific person. So this challenge paragraph is a challenge paragraph because it's really hard. Most groups take at least 15 minutes to get through the whole paragraph, some take longer. So go easy on yourself if you decide to tackle this paragraph later. But let's talk about ways to practice, because without that, none of this matters, right? Because this is hard to change the way you communicate in general, right? So just jump in when you want to, because we've got a pretty small group here. What are some ways that we can practice this material?
I think it might be cool to like maybe just open a page in a book and try to redo the sentences using gender neutral language.
That's a fantastic idea. I recommend not using classic fantasy fiction for that, but classic fantasy fiction is a great place for seeing examples of gender neutral language, because classic fantasy fiction is written by a bunch of white men, which means all the characters are a bunch of men, which means they can't just keep saying he, him all the time and get all the characters mixed up, right? So they had to use gender neutral language without pronouns in order to convey what the heck is going on in a way that the author can actually read. So if you, like, Lord of the Rings is a great example of that. You've got this whole fellowship of male characters, and so you can see how to talk about a whole pile of people without pronouns that way. But otherwise, other literature is better for that method that you had in mind. Great idea. Does anyone have any others?
Maybe practicing with some friends.
That's a fantastic idea. Do you have ideas for how that could work?
I think it's a little bit harder currently because we're not like going to people's houses and just hanging out. And so I think it could be a little less spontaneous, but maybe just setting up a little virtual meetup is the only thing that comes to mind.
It's a fantastic idea. And if you need someone to talk about, you can practice talking about me, because if you notice, I never told any of you what my pronouns are. You can definitely practice this on me. Does anyone have other ideas?
Well, just to piggyback off of that, it might be helpful to actually find sort of an accountability partner, whether it's a colleague or a life partner or family member, and whether it's for a particular conversation or maybe in an ongoing way, just try to challenge each other that in a kind way to point it out, to say we're going to try not to use pronouns, and let's, kind of point it out if we slip, and try to help each other to stick with following through on that.
That's a fantastic idea. As our keynote pointed out, we're not going to improve anything unless we're actually working together and with kindness and love in our hearts, and like, oh, use the pronoun, or oh, is that what you said, she, those kinds of things are really helpful. It's a great way to build community and work together. Any other ideas before we go on to just QA? Well, one idea is social media. When you're sitting there writing a post, you have plenty of time to think about what you're writing. I challenged myself not to use any pronouns on social media, and it took me about a year of practicing that way and in person before I got fairly decent at not using pronouns in my regular language. In any time you're writing something down is a great time to practice this, because you have time to think and edit before anyone ever sees it. So I think we're going to go to just QA/group discussion. If anyone has questions or comments about the material, for me, for each other, from other groups, now's the time.
I have 2 questions, if you don't mind. Firstly, can I ask what your pronouns are?
You can ask, but I'm not going to tell you.
Well, I was wondering because it seems more respectful in this circumstance to just ask a person's pronouns when you meet them or before trying to talk about them when they're not around than it is to eliminate gendered language and even the pronouns that they've chosen to use entirely.
Oh, I'm very glad you brought this up, because here's the thing. If someone tells you my pronouns are whatever, you absolutely should be using those pronouns when you refer to that person. Definitely. This is not about erasing gender, because, I mean, it's analogous but not the same as how race blindness is actually a form of racism. So, like, you're right. It is very rude to just ignore what someone tells you their pronouns are. These are meant to be tools in general when you're talking about people you don't know, people you can't ask, people who would be rude to ask. And like, my personal opinion, in like, I haven't said this, I am transgender, right? So of all of the groups of marginalized individuals, I can think of very few who are less unified than transgender people when it comes to opinions about ourselves, right? So what I'm about to say is something that is about me, and it is not representative of my community. There are people who agree with me, there are people who disagree with me, and there are transgender people who have called me a TERF for what I'm about to say. And I think it's really important to provide that context so that you can all have your own thoughts and opinions about what I'm about to tell you, which is that my personal opinion is that asking everyone what their pronouns are and requiring pronouns during introduction circles and requiring pronouns in email subject blocks is inclusion 101, and it can cause problems and harm. To me, inclusion 201 is I'm going to be comfortable with not knowing what your gender is. That way you don't have to tell me and we can still engage in a positive way. Requiring pronouns is useful if, 1, everyone knows what their pronouns are. 2, everyone wants to share what their pronouns are. 3, no one is put, I formatted that wrong. If somebody is not comfortable sharing their pronouns, if somebody doesn't know what their pronouns are, if somebody is gender fluid and has pronouns that change all the time and they don't want to spend 5 minutes telling you about it, like, there are all kinds of reasons why people feel put on the spot and uncomfortable when it comes to being asked their pronouns. People need to be able to not talk to you about something as personal as their gender identity if they don't want to. And it's really hard to give them the space to not talk about it if you're asking them point blank. I don't use pronouns in my regular life. No one who knows me well will refer to me with any pronouns at all ever, because it makes me uncomfortable. And my reasons for that are not something I'm going to get into. Sorry, I actually forgot what I was about to say. Have I answered your question?
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you for sharing.
Anyone else? Sorry, I kind of like lost myself on a tangent there.
I appreciate you sharing. I think a lot of, this whole conference is about, and, the times that we're in is really coming back to being radical, obviously about self-love, but taking back our individual autonomy. And so that's, governing our own bodies and our own experience through life. So I definitely get what you have to say, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. I do think it's ironic that according to anthropological measurements, we have the most individualistic society on the planet. And yet we also really don't have that much autonomy in the ways that you're talking about. It's a really interesting dichotomy to me. That's, again, outside of the scope of this workshop, so does it have a more relevant question than that tangent I was about to go on again.
I have a question about titles, because they vex me greatly, especially since I do not intend to be doctor or anything. Mm-hmm. Is there a satisfactory way to get around them? You
mean as in to not have to use them?
Yeah. I also, Yeah, I'm not satisfied with any of the ones that apply to me, and I'm not sure how to get around it.
Are you talking about when you're referring to other people or when other people refer to you?
Mostly for myself, but I also don't like that I'm making a guess when I refer to other people.
I'm going to start with referring to other people because that's easier.
Yeah, okay.
So when I am, let's say, because right now we're in a pandemic, right? I'm never talking to anyone in person. It's all online. I'm sending emails all the time, that kind of thing. If I don't know anything about a person, like I'm applying for jobs, I don't know these people, I certainly don't know what their genders are. The first thing I do is I Google them. Once I find them, I see like whether on LinkedIn or whatever, if they have a doctorate, if they have some kind of like doctor, reverend, that kind of title, if they have it, I use it. If I can't find that information, I go and I find what their job title is and I refer to them as that. If somebody is a director of HR, I say director last name. If somebody is a technician, I say technician last name, right? I use their job title instead of what I'm making up in my head about their gender. Oh, and I say making up in my head about their gender, I'll tell you another thing for context, which is everyone who meets me thinks they know what my gender is. If I ask the room, show of hands, who thinks I'm a man, almost half the hands go up. Show of hands, how many people think I'm a woman? Almost half the hands go up. Show of hands, how many people think I'm something else? The few remaining hands go up. And they're all completely convinced that they're right. And it's utterly absurd. We all think we know what other people's genders are, we just don't. So in terms of other people referring to you, please don't call me that. Please call me such and such. Please just call me by my name. Please don't use a title for me, that kind of thing. But if we're talking about online forums where you have to check a box before you can even talk to someone, that's so incredibly frustrating. What I tend to do when that happens is find their feedback mechanism and say, hey, I would really like to use your service, but I can't because you're forcing me to lie about myself before I can do it. And I've also done that for friends who feel scared of doing it. Like I will do it for them so that they can be anonymous about it. If you don't want to do it yourself, find someone who will do it for you. Talk to somebody. If you're a student at Cal Poly, talk to someone at the Pride Center. I'm sure someone there would do it for you. If you're not a student at Cal Poly, you can email me. And speaking of which, I'm going to drop my own evaluation form, which is different from the CSQ one, in the chat. That link will help me make this workshop better for the next time I teach it. And the confirmation page at the end has my email address on it if you want to contact me about anything. But I'm sorry, Jocelyn, I know that wasn't all that helpful. Do you have a clarifying question to redirect?
No, the first one is helpful. Just going out to try to see if there are alternatives to using a title at all. And then for myself, sort of the same. I just have to be more assertive than I tend to prefer to be.
And that's unfortunate, right? And we don't like putting people in that position, which is why I don't like asking people what their pronouns are, because asking what someone's pronouns are is just a coded way of saying what's your gender, which is rude. And again, that is not something that other people agree with me about. And I'm sure that there are people who are angry when I say that, transgender people who are angry when I say that. And I feel like it's important for me to make sure that everyone here knows that I'm not, not representative of trans people on that one. Any other questions? I know we're about over time.
Alrighty, going once, going twice. I thank you everybody for being here. I put the link, Dendron put the link put the link to Dendron survey in the chat, as well as I put the link for the CSQ survey. If you fill out our survey, you get entered to win Renee Taylor's book, and also just provides us with helpful feedback. Thank you, Dendron. Thank you all for being here. This will be recorded, hopefully accessible at a later date. So yeah, thank you everybody. And we're having our closing session in just about 10-15 minutes as well. So thank you all so much for being here. And thank you, Dendron.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks so much, Dendron.
Katie asked, do I feel it works to invite people to share pronouns during group instruction so long as there's space for them to choose not to? Absolutely, yes. If you say, go around, say your names and pronouns if you feel like it, that's a space where I feel comfortable. In a space where you have multiple leaders, if you can rig it ahead of time so that some of them are saying their pronouns and some of them aren't, that adds the clout, shall we say, to make more people feel more comfortable doing more things. And when I say leader, it doesn't have to be an official leader. Just if you can rig it with people with lots of social capital in that space doing each thing, that's what really gives permission to do both things.
Thank you for suggesting that. That's very helpful. I appreciate it.
That's what my Quaker group does. So
awesome. It works. Thank you for a great session.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.